Well, hello and welcome. Welcome, community. Welcome, speakers. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you the amazing speakers that we have lined up today. And today it's about us working together. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's panelists. We have Gladys Vega, community leader and executive director of La Colaborativa, which focuses on empowering Latinx immigrants, advancing the social and economic health of the community. We also have Brian Kais, Chelsea Police Chief, an ally and friend of the community immigrant for many, many decades, and Peggy Shakur, Deputy Regional Director of ADL New England. And let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So we have two main goals for this conversation. Number one, we want to talk a little bit about how we can work together and make the city of Chelsea safer for people to feel more comfortable, more welcome. And also, we want to learn what to do when someone experiences a hate crime or an incident. So, Peggy, I will start with you. And there's so much information and so much confusion, but could you tell us what is the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident? Are there different names for the same thing?
That's a great question because there's often a lot of confusion about the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident. I think it's helpful to think about these things in three categories: something that's a crime, something that's a hate crime, and something that's a hate incident. They're all related, but it's important to understand the differences. A hate crime has a specific meaning under the law. It involves a crime, some kind of criminal act against a person or property, plus something extra, being able to prove that the victim was intentionally selected due to prejudice against their real or perceived characteristics. So for example, due to their race, their gender, religion, ethnicity, LGBTQ plus status, disability status. When a crime meets this high bar for being a hate crime, there may be a stiffer penalty. So let's think about some examples. An anti-Semitic graffiti at a synagogue or anti-Islamic graffiti at a mosque might qualify as a hate crime. Or just if we look across the way from Chelsea to neighboring Winthrop this past summer, 2 Black residents of Winthrop were targeted and shot to death by a white supremacist, someone who committed a crime and intentionally selected the victims due to their prejudice against race. So we can talk about some other examples too. There could be hate speech at rallies, displaying offensive materials on private property, distribution of hate flyers. And some of these are actually hate incidents, something that's motivated by hatred, prejudice, or bigotry, but isn't a crime. So something that might be an exercise of free speech, but doesn't meet, or it might also be a crime, but something that doesn't meet that high bar for being a hate crime because some victim was not intentionally selected. So the key takeaway here is, regardless of what category something falls into, whether it's a crime, whether it's a hate crime, or it's not a crime at all, but a hate incident, all of these cause harm to a community and make people in the community feel less safe. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the steps we can take together to make people and communities safer.
Thank you, Peggy. That makes so much sense. And I just want to echo what you were saying, that regardless if we're experiencing a hate crime or a hate incident, it has a harm, it has a negative impact in our community. So Gladys, let's talk a little bit about, now that we understand the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident, let's talk a little bit about what type of incidents are you hearing is happening in the city of Chelsea, and what is the impact on our community, particularly the immigrant community?
So I think that in terms of actual hate crimes, we don't see that many. We don't witness as many. And at times it could be because people don't report it or they don't identify it as such. I think one of the incidents that was that I approached the Chelsea Police Department was at a church across from the high school, where they put sort of like the Nazi signs in a church. And immediately we contacted Chelsea Police Department, and they took a report, and they also sent DPW to cover over it. And then from there, we haven't received any other incidents of hate crimes to my knowledge. And once again, what you have to understand in Chelsea, that is very hard for people to at times to report incidents, because even though they know that we're a sanctuary city and that working with the police department is pretty safe, at times they're being undocumented may be a pause for them to sort of like go to the police department or file a claim. And once again, the description of a hate crime at times is very confusing, and people don't know enough about it in order for them to understand that it's incredibly important for them to report it.
Thank you, Gladys. That's very important to highlight that this information is for anyone, regardless of immigration status. So, Chief Kise, from your perspective as police chief, what types of activity are you seeing? What is the community reporting to you?
So yeah, great question, and I'm glad that Gladys and I truly see things the same way. I mean, certainly, things can change tomorrow, but going back for the past, the longest time, we really in this city, we really have not seen a large number of hate crimes. Thank God. We're a very diverse community. The majority of our population is Latino. We have a lot of folks that do get along together. Various religious groups and ethnicities and races and so forth, but there's always the potential for certainly one situation. We do have training for our officers to understand what are in fact violations of the law, whether somebody is targeted on their person or their property, as was outlined by Peggy. It's very important that we have a thorough investigation when these type of incidents do occur. I know in talking with some of my fellow police chiefs from around the state, and you mentioned, Peggy mentioned about what happened over in Winthrop, and a significant tragedy. And Winthrop is fairly close, certainly, to Chelsea. That, again, we're lucky that we're somewhat insulated from these type of incidents. But like Gladys mentioned, there are still some people that potentially could have been targeted because of their race, ethnicity, religion, and they are apprehensive about coming forward to report the crimes to the police. There are some folks that may be in the city, living in the city without lawful status, and they have that fear that if they do report to the police as a victim, that potentially they could kind of get wrapped up with the federal authorities via ICE and so forth. Gladys does in her organization, they do a phenomenal job really putting the message out there that you really truly need to trust the police for any types of victimization. But I think, again, because we are such a diverse group in our city, we're a small area, but a large population in a small area, that other issues that other folks are experiencing in other parts of the state, things in terms of hate, we're able to skirt that for now. But again, on kind of in the flash of a moment or in the turn of a dime, that could change. But I think the message, I guess, for me is, and again, for me as a law enforcement officer, to reach out to the community and say, please, you truly need to trust the police, is one thing. And sometimes folks might take that with a grain of salt. But for someone like Gladys and her reputation and her leadership, to say that message, that same message, it definitely is something that's more impactful for our residents to hear it from her than honestly from me. And many times her and I are joined at the hip and have these joint meetings together. And I love it when it happens, because I love when we say the same message, and coming from her voice, it resonates that much more with the residents for them to have trust in the police and report these type of crimes.
Thank you, Chief Kise. I just want to also emphasize the fact that La Colaborativa has been doing an amazing work in supporting our community during the pandemic. And as you said earlier, Gladys is a trusted voice. It's someone that we can all look up to and trust when she encourages us to report these incidents. So, Peggy, let's talk a little bit about why it is important to report these incidents, even when they're not necessarily hate crimes.
It's important because we all have the same goal. And I think we've heard this now from Chief Kais and from Gladys that we are all committed to keeping our community safer. And one way of doing that is making sure that people speak up when they see something that's not making other community members safe, or if they're experiencing something that makes them feel unsafe. So knowing what's going on in our community is essential to everybody's well-being. The second piece of this is that when there's good data, public officials can act on the data. We at ADL advocate for improved security and improved community safety structures in Beacon Hill. And when we have data, we're much better able to make the case that hate incidents happen, that communities are threatened, and that support needs to be given from the government to address it. And this, we've also touched quite a bit on the importance of reporting and reporting to Chelsea Police, reporting to ADL. I just want to stress can be done anonymously, and it can be done in both Spanish and in English. So folks should feel comfortable being able to make these concerns known either to ADL or the Chelsea Police.
Thank you, Peggy. Gladys, let's talk a little bit more as to, you know, the reality of our community, right? We have alluded a little bit about how people who may not have a legal status may feel the backlash or they feel uncomfortable. In your experiences, what are the other barriers or the other reasons people feel hesitant to report these incidents? And how can we make them feel more comfortable to actually come forward?
The chief of police knows that with us, it has been always about communication and trust. And that when there's an incident, we immediately are both on the phone, and then we come together as one to address the community. So I think that those issues are very, very important in order for us to prevent hate crimes. And I think that at times, you know, I could see language barriers, but our police department are quite diverse, and they speak both languages and other languages. So once again, I don't want to sound like we have a perfect city, but we have a city that communicates. We have a city that when there's something wrong, we address it, and the police department and the police chief doesn't hide anything. If there's something wrong, he's the first one to investigate. He's like, Gladys, we're dealing with it. Let me get back to you in a couple of weeks when the Attorney General's office or the DA is looking into it. And in the meantime, it's under investigation. But as soon as, you know, he makes a decision or a decision is made based on that investigation, he's the first one to call me and then the first one to do a public statement. So, and people see that. So for me, it's been a beauty, but it's also been a constant challenge in communication. We're constantly making sure that we communicate it and that we addressing the community members that if you don't feel comfortable going to the police department because you may be seen as reporting something, then come to the Chelsea Collaborative. We'll call the police officers to come to us and nothing happened. Nobody's going to see you entering the police department to put a complaint or something. So I think that many of the other cities and towns and many other police departments should take these actions in consideration the way that we have done it in Chelsea, because the success that we have of not having a lot of hate crimes is because of that. It's because we hire within, we respect our diversity. Understanding diversity comes from the top and goes all the way down.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I think that we are seeing that the city of Chelsea is reaping the fruits of so many years and decades of hard work and conversation. But let's not also forget that in the last few months and years, we have seen an influx of recent arrivals, individuals that are coming to the state, people that are moving, that perhaps don't necessarily know this rich, the richness of what's happening in the city of Chelsea. And perhaps some individuals may ask, well, if I report an incident to the police, is that information going to be reported to ICE? So Chief Kais, could you just address what you report and what you don't report to an ICE officer if someone reports a hate or an incident?
Sure, well, definitely. And Gladys, I really appreciate those comments. And just, one quick line is just that we certainly, there probably is no perfect community in our state and probably across the country, but we do focus on our strengths and we do recognize our shortfalls and always try to get better each and every day. And then Patricia, to that question, honestly, we don't report anything to ICE, meaning when folks come forward as victims, when folks come forward as witnesses to crimes, ICE has no reason whatsoever to be involved in any of that. The only time that a component of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE falling under them potentially would be involved, whether it be Chelsea, Everett, Boston, or any department across the country, is if somebody is arrested. If somebody is arrested for an offense, the local police or the state police, we don't affirmatively reach out to ICE, but we do take their fingerprints electronically. And the biometrics, they get reported to the state police instantaneously, to the FBI instantaneously, and then and only then via electronics and databases does ICE have access to who is in fact arrested. But folks that come forward to tell the story, they were victimized, ICE has no reason to be involved in that, nor would we ever even, I hope that all departments operate the same. Would there be any reason to reach out to the federal government, but somebody that's looking for help and support? I think that, Gladys and her organization and others to just continually preach that message that you can trust the police. It's a transparent organization. We're certainly held to a high level of organizational accountability. Gladys mentioned the diversity of the police department. When I started in 1987, we had one African-American officer and one Latino officer. Today, we're a majority minority police department. The vast majority of our officers are in fact Latino, come from Latino backgrounds. We reflect the appearance of the community. We speak the language. But again, we're not perfect. We try to get better all the time. And we're all about breaking any existing cycle of violence. We're all about basically dispelling any myths or rumors, Patricia, to your question, that if I go into the police station, they're going to pick up the phone and call ICE and I or somebody in my family might end up getting deported. We want folks to know that that is absolutely not the case, because the inverse is true, meaning what happens is people that target folks that they think, for whatever reason, are from another country and they may be without lawful status, they try to hold that over their head. And basically tell them, if you report this, I'm going to pick up the phone and call ICE. We want to break that cycle, because if they're victimized once, whether it's for a hate crime or really any crime, they're going to be victimized again and again and again. So I think the police department, and working with the true leaders like Gladys of the community, to get that message out there and to do it one day at a time. And I always say this with the officers here in Chelsea: we build relationships and we build trust one day at a time, one shift at a time, one interaction at a time. And that's for today. Tomorrow's another day. We got to keep at it each and every single day, so that level of trust at its as high as possible level. And then and only then can we be hopefully as safe and secure as possible. But again, focusing on our strengths, recognizing our shortfalls, and doing what we can to address them.
Thank you, Chief Kais. It's so comforting to know that we all understand that although it may not be perfect, you all have achieved a lot by working together with the organizations on the ground, working with the police department, and you continue to highlight this important aspect of communication, diversity, working as a group. So let me just try to wrap up what we have been talking so far as we are getting to the conclusion of this presentation. We started by highlighting that there's a difference between a hate crime and an incident of crime or incident of hate. Regardless of the technicalities, both have an impact on the community. No one should be experiencing this type of suffering. And we encourage our community, regardless of if you've been in the country for 1 year or 1 day, you have allies, you have friends. You can reach out to the police department. You can reach out to La Colaborativa. You can reach out to anyone. We want you to report these incidents. And we are also hearing how it is beautiful to see when the community counts with the support of the police department, from the leadership all the way down. So Peggy, in closing, let's talk a little bit about what else can we do together as we reflect on what we just heard. What are some other ways that we can continue to work together to make our community safer?
Thank you, Patricia. Trust is really where it starts. And I think what we've heard today from Chief Kise and from Gladys, the trust and the cooperative nature between our law enforcement officers in Chelsea and community organizations and community leaders is something that has been built over a long period of time, but pays a lot of dividends and should offer a lot of comfort to the community that there are many places they can go to report incidents of hate, whether to La Colaborativa, whether to ADL, or whether to Chelsea Police. But collectively, there's a very strong and sincere commitment to making communities safer. So in terms of how each of us can continue to work to make our communities safer, one thing we can all do is to support victims, whether we know them or not, by speaking up and speaking out, and also speaking in their own language. And that's why we allow have a process for incidents to be reported, not just in English. Obviously, don't participate in hateful behavior and speak up when you see it. Ask for help when you need it. And take advantage of the online resources to report both to Chelsea Police or to ADL online, anonymously if you feel more comfortable doing so. Because with that information, we can take action, we can count statistics, and we can advocate for change.
Thank you so much, Peggy. And Chief Kise and Gladys, would you like to share additional strategies or additional tools that all of us can put in place in order for us to continue to work on creating the city of Chelsea even a safer and a more welcoming city?
Gladys?
I would add that see them beyond their uniform. Like the fact that we include them when we're doing Thanksgiving, they're like there with us in the line. They providing meals when they're distributing food. They're giving toys out. They're picking up toys with us. Like I try to highlight everything that we do with the police department so the community sees them not as a threat, but as their neighbors. They live in the city of Chelsea. So I always try to sort of like make sure that our local police department is participating in a lot of the events that we do so that the fear is less. I mean, right during the pandemic, when we were relocating families, because when they got out of the hospital, their keys were changed, the police department were right there with us, picking up their belongings and they would be like making sure that our families were able to acquire their property because the landlord was holding to the property and didn't want to give them because they were behind on rent. And it was amazing just to have a police officer as a friend and not as that person that is arresting your mom and your dad, etc. Also, every opportunity that you have, highlight the partnerships that we can do when we trust the police and when we see a crime and we report it. And I also talk about, guys, if you report a crime and you don't have documentation and you're a victim of a crime yourself, we can get you immigration protections. So don't feel that by you staying with the criminal activity that is happening to you and not reporting it in a professional way or not reporting it to us at all, it doesn't mean that people are not going to listen. The police department will listen. If not, we'll make sure that we'll get you some protections. And that has always been the case. So I think continue to work and continue to enhance the relationship between the community and the police officers. After all, once again, they're our neighbors. I live in a street with 4 police officers, 1 state trooper and 3 police officers.
You're well protected. Chief Kise?
Yeah, no, I mean, I really can't top that. I mean, there's a line from 1829 with Sir Robert Peel. It said the police are the public and the public is the police. And I couldn't agree more. I think that even in a somewhat busy city like Chelsea, in terms of like quote unquote law enforcement or enforcing the laws, that's probably 10% of what we do. 90% of what we do is relationship building. 90% of what we do is everything that Gladys just outlined as far as being part of a team approach to be helpful in any way we possibly can. Long gone are the days of the silo, at least in my opinion, and hopefully in this city and hopefully across the Commonwealth, but the silo of law enforcement being this closed structure, men and women that get into the police cruisers and drive around to take calls and arrest bad guys for robbing banks. That's a small part of what we do. We need to work with the community. We need to work to continue to build self-sustaining, strong communities. I'm incredibly lucky that behind the leadership of Gladys and folks like Gladys, that I have that ability to do that. In some other communities, unfortunately, it's not always the case. So basically, as Gladys, I'll kind of laugh, but I'll call Gladys and we'll have these conversations. I go, Gladys, what do you want me to do? What do you need me to do? And she loves being the director, and I love being directed. So I just, kind of follow suit. But I think that's the way it should be. I think problem solve together, team approach, work together, be open, be ongoing. Be like Gladys talked about, the offices in the city, being involved in many things that are totally non-traditional of law enforcement, because like Peggy said, everything is about trust. That's how you build, and that's how you enhance trust. And I, as one police officer, love being part of that approach and that process. And hopefully we can continue to do great things behind that.
Macy, thank you both. Peggy, I would like to ask you also, so we can wrap up this segment, what are the strategies or tools should we all use as part of the community, right, to make the city of Chelsea a safer and a more welcoming city?
I think that's a wonderful way to end this program. So let's recap on some tools and strategies each of us can use in the future in this fight against hate. First one, report hate crimes and hate incidents. Second, remember that you always have the option to report anonymously and in your own language. 3, learn how to support targets of hate in their own language. 4th, reporting makes our communities safer and more welcoming. And 5th, be an ally. And being an ally is something that you don't need to wear a badge or have a fancy title. It's something that everybody can do, to speak up and speak out when they see something concerning happening in their own community. And through this conversation today, I hope people will leave knowing that there are many ways to make that information known so that it can be acted on, and in the end, communities can be safer.
Thank you so much. We are concluding this segment. We would like to again thank Gladys Vega, Chief Kais, and Peggy Shakur from ADL. Thank you so much for the work that you all do. And I suppose one last comment we want to make is that no one needs to feel that they are alone. You can reach out to ADL. You can reach out directly to the police. You can reach out to the Colaborativa. We are here for you, and no one should feel that they have to experience any type of incident by themselves. So thank you for your time. Please share this video with others, and we'll see you again soon. I'm Patricia Sobarbarro. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.